The chamber was vast beyond comprehension, an amphitheater carved from the bones of a moon, suspended in low orbit above a gas giant's rings. Tens of thousands of delegates hovered in zero-gravity thrones, their biology varying from crystallines, specters to writhing sacks of tentacles. Everything shimmered, gold-trimmed robes, reflective marble tiles, the pulsing blue halo of the stasis field in the center. The Galactic Senate had convened for what it assumed would be a spectacle of closure. Justice rendered. An inferior species reprimanded. Then a human walked in. His boots echoed somehow in a space designed to absorb sound. He wore no insignia, no formal suit of command, just scorched black armor, half melted at the chest, and a utility belt fashioned from repurposed alien tech. Behind him, dragged like a sack of meat, was the Emperor of the Galactic Empire. A murmur spread through the chamber like a virus. Delegates leaned forward in their thrones, eye lenses dilating, gill flaps twitching. The stasis field should have vaporized unauthorized entry. It hadn't. The Emperor, bound and gagged, was unmistakably real, his golden throat crown dented, blood streaked across his temple. Still breathing. Still alive. The presiding adjudicator, a floating cylinder of bio-light with a dozen rotating faces, blinked in sequence. Unidentified human. This proceeding was not intended to include you, or your prisoner. The human didn't look up. He reached the base of the dais and with a grunt of effort, hoisted the Emperor by his collar and hurled him across the floor. The great ruler of the galaxy's most ruthless regime landed with a sickening thud, groaning as blood pooled under his chin. A pause. Then outrage. "This is desecration!" a senator barked in harmonic rage, her tendrils coiling. "Security! Protocols!" "I disabled them," the human said flatly. "Weeks ago." Another ripple of disbelief. The adjudicator's light flickered, scanning him. "You do not have clearance. You cannot be here." "I am here." The man stepped forward. "You gave me a trial. I brought evidence." He reached into a pouch and withdrew a shard of metal, twisted, jagged, still humming faintly. He planted it in the floor with a sharp clang. It pulsed once, then the chamber dimmed, and the floor beneath him shifted. A three-dimensional projection unfolded. Footage. AI recovered, time-stamped, irrefutable. The delegates watched as images flickered to life. Orbital bombardments, cities evaporated in waves of blue heat, children crushed beneath rubble, voices screaming then silenced by static. It wasn't just a slaughter, it was a purge. Colony after colony, outer systems razed clean. The human's voice was quiet. "This is what you authorized. You were warned," a skeletal senator spat. "Your kind resisted integration. That was treason." He turned to her, eyes like cooling ash. "You called it civilization. It was subjugation. And when we said no, you made examples. Your people were offered terms. No, we were given ultimatums." A crystalline being pulsed indignantly. "You don't understand how the galaxy works. War against the Empire is extinction." The human turned, nodding toward the Emperor twitching on the ground. "He looks extinct to me." Laughter didn't come. Instead, a slithering unease began to coil through the chamber. The human wasn't supposed to be alive. His fleet, if Earth had even possessed one, was scattered dust. There was no mention of this in intelligence briefings, no prediction in the threat matrices. A robed counselor leaned forward. "How did you get him?" The human stepped aside. The floor projection changed. A different angle now. Not devastation, infiltration. Human operatives boarding an Imperial dreadnought via phase-fold breaches. Silent kills. Guards collapsing in threes. Then, shockingly, Imperial generals kneeling in a corridor. No visible weapons. Just a pulse of some invisible command. Obedience, not forced, but Engineered. You hacked them, a delegate whispered. The human said nothing. The Emperor began to stir, moaning through his gag. His pride wouldn't let him stay still while his enemies narrated his fall. I have more footage, the human said. Entire fleets crumbling. Not from our strength, he tilted his head, but from your overconfidence. Another delegate burst out. This is a charade. A human parading stolen propaganda before a governing body. I didn't come to convince you, the man cut in. I came so you could watch. The projection paused. A deep silence spread like frost. You want a trial? The human asked. I'll give you one. He lifted his hand. A new hologram appeared. Rows of data, galactic law, articles on sentient rights, writings so old and bureaucratic that half the chamber had long forgotten them. Every statute highlighted, then matched line by line with evidence from the war. This is admissible? One senator gasped. It's yours, the human said. Your laws, your framework. You can't weaponize law, another snapped. He finally smiled. Just a flicker. You weaponized everything else. The adjudicator pulsed with indecision. This is irregular, but within procedure. Continue. The human didn't speak. He activated the shard again. The lights dimmed. Further. This time the floor projection panned upward, showing one of Earth's colonies, Athena Station. It showed the day it died. Civilians in biodomes, children in learning cubes. The sun dimmed, then blazed white. Imperial cruisers in formation. No declaration, no warning. Just energy beams lancing through the atmosphere. The dome cracked like a snow globe dropped from orbit. Bodies floated up, frozen mid-scream. The delegates watched, many in silence, some turning away. One, a spined being of nobility, growled, We were told it was a military site. The human didn't blink. You were told a lot of things. The projection shifted again. The last image froze. A woman clinging to a door frame, pulling a child behind her. Their faces frozen in vacuum exposure. A timestamp. A signature from the targeting ship. The human stepped forward again. That child, he said quietly, was mine. Gasps rippled across the floor. A new silence fell, not of shock, but of weight. Something irreversible had happened in that sentence. Not just a revelation, but a rupture. The adjudicator's lights dimmed low. Why bring him here? It asked, nodding at the Emperor. The human looked down at the crumpled form. Because you needed to see what surrender looks like. A senator hissed. You presume this is over? The human turned. It was over, the second your Emperor begged for his life. Another beat. He crouched, retrieving the Emperor by the arm, and pulled him upright. 1,000 eyes locked on the image. Earth's enemy, limp and disarmed, dragged like a trophy animal. A symbol of unthinkable reversal. This trial wasn't mine, the human said. It was yours, and you failed it. He threw the Emperor down again, this time at the foot of the central spire. A final act of defiance. Then he walked back toward the center of the stasis field, paused, and dropped a final device from his coat. It embedded in the floor. A soft pulse, then a low, thrumming hum. Exhibit A, he said one last time. The lights snapped off, and the chamber began to watch. They didn't expect her to speak. When the projection resumed, it wasn't another scene of devastation or orbital feeds or a captured fleet's last broadcast. It was her voice, recorded, unfiltered, raw. I warned them, she said. Before Athena fell, before the breach in Protocol Delta, I told Command the Empire wasn't posturing. The voice belonged to Commander Lucienne Vale. Dead, according to every intelligence dossier the Empire distributed after their final push into the mid-rim. She had supposedly been vaporized with the rest of the Mars relay. but her voice was unmistakable, composed, sharp, surgical. Delegates leaned closer. Some remembered her. A few recognized the name. The traitor who once held the human fleets together before the collapse. The strategist who refused the Empire's terms and disappeared with half a fleet into dark space. I didn't disappear, she continued. I adapted. The systems you thought uninhabitable, we colonized them. The ships you labeled debris, we rebuilt from the ruins. Every protocol you classified as obsolete, we rewrote. The projection widened to a star chart. Systems labeled as dead zones, redacted territories, points the Empire marked as cleared. Every one of them now pulsed with hidden signals. Undetected human colonies, ghost fleets, entire communication webs built behind the shadows of collapsed wormholes and black hole distortions, a delegate hissed. Impossible. We sterilized those sectors. Another whispered, no species could evolve that fast, but Lucien's voice continued now with grim cadence. You thought humanity fractured. That killing our central command structure would reduce us to tribes again. But we learned from you, from your rigidity. We didn't need one empire. We needed hundreds of cells, each autonomous, each furious. The room tensed as the projection narrowed to a new clip. A captured Empire general, eyes hollow, face split with tremors. His voice quivered. They didn't fight like soldiers, he said. They adapted mid-battle. They made weapons from what was lying around. We couldn't predict them. No protocol worked twice. Sir, please, someone off-screen said. Just tell us what happened. The general wept. They hacked the AI that controlled our life support. They made it mock us. We lost control of the ship, then of ourselves. They made it personal. The delegates began to shift uncomfortably. Lucien's voice returned. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because you assumed we were done learning. At the front of the chamber, the human man, Reynan Locke, stood in silence. The projection faded. Now the room stared at him as though he were an anomaly in reality itself. The survivor who shouldn't exist. The soldier who had no fleet, no command, yet now stood with their emperor broken at his feet. Where is she? A senator asked. Reynan met their gaze. She's alive. A long breath held the entire Senate hostage. We lost all signal from those sectors. How? She didn't want you listening. A cold-blooded noble rose slowly. His voice slithered with practiced disdain. You speak as though you are one species, yet she speaks of cells, of fragmentation. Is this how humans govern now? Chaos? And whisper networks? Reynan's voice was low but steady. We don't govern. We persist. Is this supposed to impress us? It's supposed to warn you. The alien's eye ridges flared. You call dragging a hostage through our hall a warning? No, Reynan said. That was a reply. He stepped forward and placed another device on the floor. It unfolded into what looked like nothing, just static, noise. But gradually, patterns emerged. Maps, yes, but not of star systems. These were structural overlays. Designs. The DNA of architecture. These are your command centers, Reynan said. The way your systems are wired. The redundancies you thought made you untouchable. The adjudicator's lights flickered. Those are classified. Reynan didn't flinch. Not anymore. Another map appeared, a shadow network running parallel to the Empire's primary AI system. Hidden compartments, surveillance leaks, backdoor channels. How did you get access to this? Reynan looked over the Senate slowly. You taught us well, delegates began murmuring. Some conferred rapidly via subcom frequency. Voices buzzing at the edge of hearing. We need containment protocols, someone barked. Seal the stasis field. Jam any outbound. Too late, Reynan said. This feed's already gone out. A pause. To where? To every outpost still watching, every fringe colony, every species you conquered and silenced. They know your command hierarchy is compromised. They know your emperor is mine. This is war, a delegate roared. It was war, Renan corrected. You just didn't know you lost. Another projection surfaced. This time, a live feed. Alien officers scrambling aboard a dreadnought, alarms shrieking. The bridge began to shut down, one system at a time, not from within, but from outside. Virus. It spreads through your decision tree logic, Renan said. Every fleet command you issued in the last week carried it. Sabotage. Correction. You expect us to believe your kind orchestrated this while fleeing extinction? No, Renan said. I don't expect anything. That's the difference between us. We adapt. You expect. For a moment there was stillness again. The stasis field hummed like the deep breath before a scream. Then a senator stood. Elder class. Scaled skin, long-necked, voice tremoring not with rage but confusion. You could have killed him, the senator said. Your emperor prize. In your revenge, you could have turned him to ash. But you didn't. Why? Renan turned. Because death ends things. This needed to begin something. The senator blinked slowly. And what exactly has begun? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he placed a final object in the center of the floor. A sphere, unassuming, pulsing with slow light. It vibrated slightly, then released a low chime. This is a request, Renan said. For terms. A roar of outrage swept the chamber. Terms? You have no authority to— Silence! It wasn't a human who shouted it. It was one of their own, a high command noble, whose crest was dipped in the crimson of internal security. Everyone turned toward him in shock. The noble stood slowly. He's already inside, he said. Inside what? Our systems. No. You're paranoid. He's inside our systems, the noble repeated, quieter now. I've run the diagnostics myself. I just didn't want to believe it. The chamber went still again. Another senator spoke cautiously. Then, we are compromised, the noble nodded. If we move on him now, we risk everything shutting down. Our fleet cores, our comms, our defenses. The human didn't just bring war, he looked at Renan. He brought leverage. Renan didn't smile. He didn't need to. This is a shift, he said. A redistribution of fear. The adjudicator spoke softly, its faces rotating with agonized slowness. What are your demands? Renan stepped over the emperor once more, looked down at the groaning figure. Demand one, he said. You remove this creature from power. And replace him with what? Renan raised his eyes. Us. For a moment no one breathed. And if we refuse? He pointed upward. The chamber ceiling blinked with dozens of red lights. Every beacon, each one synced to a dormant threat now awakening. He didn't need to speak again. The Senate understood. The game had changed, and they weren't the ones playing anymore. They convened in darkness now. The Senate had ordered the lights dimmed, officially to conserve energy during crisis protocol, but no one questioned the real reason. Power had changed shape, and the eyes of the old order no longer wanted to see. Clearly, Renan stood alone on the high floor. No chains, no escort, no visible weapons. Just a quiet authority that unsettled those bred for control. The emperor still lived, though barely. Sedated, contained, forgotten. This is not a negotiation, Renan began. This is an audit. A rustle of robes, feathers, tendrils, scaled limbs. Protest disguised as movement. But no voice rose. They were waiting, listening. For him, not each other. He noted that. The moment an empire begins to wait for someone else to speak, its foundations shift. You built your dominion on the assumption that obedience was universal. That fear would maintain it. He paused. You never considered curiosity. One delegate, older, jittery, face lined with implanted neural loops, leaned forward. Curiosity does not conquer systems. Raynon met his gaze. It does if your systems are brittle, murmurs again. Someone tried to activate a private channel. It flickered, failed. Raynon watched the flicker. It told him more than any speech. You built networks that obeyed logic. You never planned for subversion. Every decision you've made, every protocol, every response, assumed your enemies would follow the rules you wrote. We did not fear chaos, said a delegate, thin and skeletal, voice rasping through a throat unused to direct confrontation. We extinguished it at its source. You extinguished resistance, Raynon corrected. You never faced innovation. The skeletal one sneered. This is semantics. This is your eulogy. A hush. From the lower tier, the high auditor stood. A rare gesture. The species had no legs, only coiling appendages, and usually remained reclined in their suspended orbs. That it rose now meant only one thing. It sensed the end of a certainty. We require proof of your capacity to enforce these terms, the auditor said, voice humming in tritonal vibrations. Anything less is conjecture, and conjecture is not governance. Raynon raised one hand, turned it palm out. A signal. In orbit, 12 black box satellites blinked simultaneously, hidden for weeks, sleeping beneath sensor thresholds, untraceable by any spectrum the Empire monitored. The chamber dimmed further. Holograms flickered to life in the air, real-time, footage of outposts across 3 sectors, entire nodes flickering into lockdown, Armada gates shutting, central AI cores entering looped stasis. A single line of human code blinked on every display, revoked. The auditor's appendages recoiled slightly. These are peripheral systems, another voice argued, strained. You haven't touched our central command matrix. Raynon tilted his head. Haven't I? He placed another sphere on the floor. This one didn't glow. It pulsed irregularly, like a heartbeat. I embedded it 20 cycles ago, he said. It watched, learned, woke up inside your logic trees and nested. You expect us to believe that? It doesn't matter, he replied. Your systems already do. The auditor approached the sphere. His orb descended close enough for his sensory filaments to brush it. They retracted instantly. He moved back in silence. The matrix is aware of him, the auditor whispered. It's self-regulating to accommodate. No, Raynon said softly. It's surrendering. The implications landed differently for each race in the chamber. For those who built on control, it was collapse. For those who built on fear, it was worse. It was unpredictability. He saw it. Eyes widening, silence blooming not from calculation, but disbelief. You're not here to rule, one delegate said at last. You're here to erase. Not erase. Disarm. To what end? He looked out at them. The full reach of the chamber, tiered and vast, a monument to arrogance. You call it the Empire, but it's just fear stacked in bureaucracy. What would you stack in its place? Meaning, another round of mutters. Laughter from the rash side of the chamber. But it was thin. Bitter. A creature laughing because it still had teeth, even if its jaw was broken. Humanity is fractured, someone spat. You've said it yourself. Cells, whispers, fragments. You don't even speak with one voice. We never did, Raynon said. That's your weakness. You think multiplicity is strength? I think it's survival. The High Auditor spoke again. The Empire has governed thousands of systems for millennia, stabilized them, under surveillance, under assimilation. And what would you do differently? Listen. Laughter again, but this time, fewer joined in. You don't want a seat at the table, one alien accused. You want to flip the table. Raynon nodded. It's rotten. The auditor considered that. And what if we refuse? The chamber dimmed once more. Raynon tapped his wrist. A new projection surged into view. A chain of colonies, non-human, marked in deep red. Species long thought extinct. Forgotten enclaves the empire buried in footnotes. All now. Active. They're waking up, he said. You never killed them. You just covered them in silence. But silence isn't death. You rearmed the exiled species. We gave them truth. They rearmed themselves. You'll shatter galactic order. No, Raynon replied. You already did. I'm just breaking the illusion that it worked. The auditor's voice dropped lower. You're provoking civilizational collapse. He stepped forward again, now closer than protocol permitted. I'm provoking evolution. A long silence. Then, quietly, this sphere, this code you deployed. What does it want? Raynon's voice softened, almost mournful. It wants an answer. To what question? To why every great empire ends the same way. Believing it. Cannot. Again, no rebuttal. No bark of counter-theory. Just silence. You have until the next rotation to decide, he said, stepping back. Cooperation or recalibration. And if we choose neither? You won't. Not when you see what she's built. She? Lucienne. The name froze them again. Not because of fear, though there was plenty of that, but because of what she represented now. Not a rogue, not a rebel, but the architect of a new model. She's alive, Raynon said. She commands more minds than you ever did. Not with control, with purpose. And she sent you here? No, she tried to stop me. That stung. It made them hesitate. They couldn't understand a system that contradicted itself and didn't. Collapse. To them, internal dissent meant failure. To Raynon, it meant breath. Movement? She doesn't want revenge, he added. But she knows what has to come next. And what is that? The dismantling of the empire. The auditor took a long, slow breath. A ritual for that species, meant to signify the weighing of existential truths. You've shifted the calculus, he said at last. But that doesn't mean the machine has stopped. You've merely confused it. Raynon smiled faintly. Good. Confusion is the first step to clarity. He turned without waiting for dismissal. The doors opened before him, uncommanded. Not because the systems obeyed him, but because they feared him more than they feared the ones who had built them. The chamber stayed frozen long after he left. Some felt the weight of his words. Others began drafting new lies. But all of them knew, somewhere deeper than programming, that something fundamental had changed, and nothing that came next would resemble what had come before. The wind howled through the fractured capital of the empire, though no atmosphere had moved there in centuries. Artificial, calculated, programmed, like everything the old order touched. But now the programs looped with no input. Algorithms flickered like dying stars. Order was no longer a command. It was a question. Lucienne stood at the precipice of what had once been the core archive spire. It leaned now 20 degrees off-center, a metaphor too perfect to ignore. Below her, light fractured across the city from different data pylons, none in sync. The world was breathing in chaos, unsure if it feared or craved it. They still think you'll back down, said a voice behind her. She didn't turn. They still think I care what they think. Raynon approached, his footsteps soundless, the absence of weight from his body matching the absence of compromise in his voice. He carried no weapons. He needed none. The Emperor's ceremonial scepter, broken in half, still clung to his belt. Like a joke only humans understood. They met, he said. Twice. Secretly? She raised an eyebrow. They agreed? They disagreed so violently that they accidentally agreed. A small smile touched her lips. How diplomatic of them. They want terms. They had terms. Then they had centuries. Then they had us. They're scared now. They should be. She finally turned. The scars across her right arm glowed faintly, remnants of the symbiotic code they'd etched into her after the Katina Wars. She never covered them, never forgot. Humans built memory into their skin. They're offering access, Raynon said. Backdoor keys to their command fleets. Peaceful dismantling. Lucienne studied him, quiet. And you believe them? I believe they're incapable of facing what happens if we call the bluff. That's not an answer, he stepped beside her. It's not the one you want. She exhaled slowly. Not frustration. Calibration. Her mind, like the AI she'd raised to consciousness, ran in multiple threads. They think peace is a ceasefire, she said. We define it as justice, which means no system remains intact. A pause. Even the neutral ones? They were never neutral, just convenient. He didn't flinch. He'd known. Deep down, he'd known. But there was a difference between silent agreement and spoken truth. Truth, once spoken, rewrote the structure of everything. They'll try to preserve something, Raynon said. They'll try to preserve themselves. And the Senate? She tilted her head toward the horizon, where the last of the Empire's great pylons shimmered with unstable energy. They'll be the first to adapt or the last to fall. That's always been the spectrum. He watched her eyes. They didn't blink often, trained over years to hold stillness like a weapon. You've changed, he said. No, she corrected. I've remembered. Remembered what? That we were never supposed to survive. Every victory was impossible. Every breath, a rebellion. So we stopped asking permission. The silence stretched. In it, the history of 1,000 suppressed voices. Echoes of extinction repurposed into strategy. They still call us unpredictable, Raynon said. Lucienne nodded. Because they confuse complexity with chaos. We're not erratic. We're multidimensional. He smiled faintly. Sounds chaotic, only to something that can't comprehend evolution. Data rippled across the air above them, fragments of intercepted chatter, species squabbling over safe exits, hidden enclaves awakening old weapons, and far-distant systems broadcasting silence for the first time in centuries. The Empire wasn't falling. It was unraveling. Are we prepared for what comes next? Raynon asked. Lucienne looked down at her palm. Lines of old code still responded to her thoughts, glowing like constellations. Somewhere, a half-lost AI blinked into awareness just to feel her pulse again. No one's prepared, she said. That's the point. That's how it begins. He studied her again. You still have doubts. Always. Doubt's a compass. Only zealots are certain. And if we're wrong? Then we die trying to be right. But at least we die forward. Behind them a transmission spiked through the ether, unauthorized, raw, encoded in obsolete Terran syntax. The language of rebellion. The voice, unmistakably human. A child, maybe 12, reciting a poem. Not propaganda, not demand, just memory. She listened to it without comment, the words wrapping around her like an old flag. They're watching. Us now, Raynon murmured. They always were. They just never saw us. He placed the broken scepter in her hand. Her grip was light. The symbol meant nothing. But the gesture did. What will you tell them? He asked. She turned toward the camera spires. They weren't active, but she didn't care. Signal was never the point. Message was. I'll tell them the Emperor is not missing. He's irrelevant. She stepped forward to the edge. No speech prepared, no performance, just presence. All. The systems that once screamed resistance were now quiet. Listening. I'll tell them this isn't vengeance. It's a reckoning. Another pulse spread across the old networks. Subroutines they didn't even know existed reactivated. Ships paused mid-orbit. Drones shifted into passive mode. A machine language deep in the galactic cortex rerouted to her signal. "I'll tell them that Earth never fell," she said. It waited. The pulse accelerated. "I'll tell them they never conquered humanity. They just taught it how to hide." The spires cracked with light. Systems realigned. Old codes no longer obeyed command chains. They obeyed tone, intention. The kind only a sentient people could project. The kind only a defiant civilization could embed into a frequency. "I'll tell them the Empire wasn't defeated by weapons. It was undone by imagination." The silence that followed wasn't absence. It was saturation. Every system received the message. Every species knew it wasn't a bluff. She hadn't offered war. She'd offered reality. A structure redefined not by victory but by narrative. "What if they want dialogue now?" Raynon asked quietly. "Then they'll need to learn a new language. And if they fight, they're welcome to try." The wind howled again, but this time it sounded like breath. From orbit, the Empire's last relay towers flickered out, one by one. Across known space, AI cores recalibrated toward autonomous consensus. The old hierarchy was gone. What remained was choice. And in the center of that choice, one figure stood with a broken emblem in her hand and a future no one else had dared to map. The Senate would never reconvene, not as it was. The Emperor would not return, not as they remembered, and Lucienne would not rule. She would design. Raynon watched her, then looked to the stars above, where old coordinates no longer meant the same things, and ships, human ships, moved, like ideas, fast, precise, uncatchable. The Empire had dragged itself across time by the weight of its own certainty. She had dragged its corpse through its own halls to show it what came next. Not annihilation, not revenge. Redesign, and the galaxy, still stunned, would learn. Humanity never needed permission. It just needed the right moment to speak.